name is Ariel Leon, and this is my super extra credit presentation called Receptors for the Senses. These are my table of contents. We start at hearing, we end at touch. What are sensory receptors? Sensory receptors help us interpret an external stimulus. Sensory receptors work by a stimulus causing sensory cells to produce an action potential that is relayed into the central nervous system to perceive said stimulus. Some sensory receptors can lead to a motor response. Our first sensory receptor is hearing. The sensory neurons for hearing are referred to as cortei. The inner ear consists of two separate regions, the cochlea and the vestibule. These two regions are responsible for hearing and balance. So how does the cortei work? The cochlear duct contains several organs of cortei that transduce the wave of motion of two scalea into neuron signals. Frequencies can also be coded through the hair cells inside the cortei that sends pressure waves from the scalea moving into the basilar membrane. Here's an example. Our second sensory receptor is taste, referred to as gustation. The surface of the tongue is lined with stratified squamous epithelium that consists of papillae. Within the papillae structure, there is taste buds that contain gustation receptor cells. The function of this gustation receptor cells is to transduce the stimuli of taste into the central nervous system. The different types of taste are sweet, salty, savory, and I believe bitter. Here are examples. You can see the gustatory cells at the bottom right. Our third sensory receptor is smell, also referred to as olfactory sensory neuron. The OSN is located in a small region within the superior nasal cavity. The OSN has dendrites that extend from the apical surface of the epithelium into the muscle lining of the cavity. Airborne molecules are inhaled through the nose, pass over the olfactory epithelial region, and dissolve into the mucus. From then on, ordinary molecules bind to proteins that keep them from dissolving in the mucus and help transport them to olfactory dendrites. The axons from the OSN extend through the cribriform plate to the ethmoid bone into the brain connecting to the olfactory bulb. Here is an example with the steamed coffee/tea. You could see the inhale steam through the nasal conchae to the olfactory bulb. Our fourth sense is sight, and the receptors for sight are called photoreceptors. There are different types of photoreceptors with different functions. One of the main photoreceptors is referred to as a cone photoreceptor. The CP contains photosensitive pigments in enfoldings of the cell membrane. There are three cone photosensitive pigments called opsins, which perceive different wavelengths of primary color, reds, greens, and blue. How does it work? Light is reflected off images and enters the eye through the cornea, then is focused on the retinized specialized cell in the retinas called ganglion cells. Those electrical signals are then sent through the neural pathway to the brain, perceiving different types of color carried by optic nerves straight to the visual cortex of the brain. Here are examples. You can see the ganglion cells. You can see the cone cells with the purple nuclei. Our last and final sense is touch. The sensory receptors for touch or motor lights are associated with touch proprioception and interoception, which include touch, vibration, light touch, tickles, itches, temperatures, and pain. Examples would be thermoreceptors and nociceptors that transduce temperature and pain stimuli. There are also mechanical receptors that sense low frequency vibrations on the surface of your skin. This would be touching silk, touching grass, touching something squishy. There are also stretch receptors that prevent contraction of a muscle to avoid muscle tearing, and they are referred to as muscle spindles. Here are my citations, and thank you so much for learning with me.